All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's good to see you all here today. We made the room a little chillier because it's so hot outside. You can store up the cold, so when you get out, it'll protect you, at least for the next 30 seconds. Anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Beverly Hills. We thank you all for coming. It says Cecilia is going to introduce me, but I maybe just skip that step and say, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julian Gold. I'm the current vice mayor of Beverly Hills. You know that the rotation would have had Council Member Wunderlich chairing this meeting, but he did not get reelected, and so I moved into this position. And excuse me, I'm excited to do so. I think we have a lot to do, as today's meeting demonstrates, and it's exciting that we can all do it together. I think we should take a little moment and go around the room, and we have some new folks and some older folks. That is to say, people have been here longer, but maybe a sweep around the room to introduce yourselves, your position, and it would be helpful to identify yourself as either the voting or non-voting delegate. So I'll start to my left.
Hello, Gabriella Yap, Deputy City Manager for Beverly Hills.
I'm Jeff Kiernan with the League of California Cities.
I'm Paul Koretz, council member for the city of Los Angeles.
Oh, voice of God.
And I'm Stein. I'm the council member's chief field and transportation deputy.
That's Jay Greenstein, whose name I don't see on here anymore.
No, it's there.
And Alex Fish, Culver City Council member, voting member.
Hi, Hernan Molina, City of West Hollywood, Governmental Affairs Liaison.
Lauren Meister, Mayor of City of West Hollywood and delegate for today.
Stephanie Venegas with the City of Santa Monica.
Anuj Gupta, Deputy City Manager, Santa Monica.
Fernando Morales, voting member on behalf of Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors.
Sue Himmelrich, City of Santa Monica. I'm the mayor and I'm here remotely. Thank you.
Riley O'Brien, analyst, West Side Cities Council of Governments.
Winnie Fong, also with the West Side Cities Council of Government.
Lauren Langer, counsel for the COG.
Cecilia Stellano, Executive Director of the COG.
Anybody else on Zoom, please?
This is Diana Ching with the City of Culver City.
This is Mayan Johnson with SCAG.
Anyone else?
This is Rubina Lazarian with LADOT.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Troy Evangelo, City of Culver City, Advanced Planning.
This is Zachary Campos with LADOT.
Okay, last chance. Going once?
Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. Good morning. Jenny Bordeaux, LA Metro, here for the Crenshaw Northern Extension.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Roger Martin, Metro as well. Crenshaw Extension presentation.
And Alex Masavi, good morning with Metro.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, thank you all for those introductions. Before we get much further, I have to turn this over to our council. So Lauren, would you please do the deed?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go right ahead. Sorry, we're sharing my, oh, thank you. Because we are conducting a hybrid meeting, we need to make AB 361 findings. The findings are that a statewide state of emergency continues to exist and local and state health officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing in order to conduct this meeting via teleconference. So we would request that the COG board discuss the findings under AB 361 and approve conducting this meeting via teleconferencing for today.
Thank you. And that is a motion? Does that come as a-
Motion, yes.
We need a motion, a second, and a roll call vote.
I
make a-
Sue
Sorry.
Himmel,
Thank you.
Second, Paul Koretz.
Fantastic. Roll call, please.
We do have to do roll call. Yep.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
yes.
City of West Hollywood,
Yes.
City of Los Angeles,
Yes.
County of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. So thank you for that. We're going to try and be efficient with time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And I know we said that this would end about 1:15, and I'd like to see if we can achieve that, even though we started a couple of minutes late. The next action item is an approval of the board meeting notes from the last meeting. I'll entertain a motion or any comments to amend.
I'll make a motion, West Hollywood.
Thank you. Is there a
I
second?
second.
Thank you. All right, and I assume nobody wants to amend it? I didn't hear any of that. Okay, roll call, please.
City of Beverly Hills,
I'm going to abstain because I was not here.
okay. City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
City of West Hollywood,
Yes.
City of Los Angeles,
I'll abstain as well.
okay. And then County of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes. All right, so we're going to move on to our action items of the day or our discussions of the day. And the first is about something I'm sure nobody in this room has heard before, something called RENA. And what that's all about, you know, I think that we've all spent a lot of time talking about this in our cities. I'm going to hand off the conversation to Cecilia and let her kick it off.
Right. And we know as a rule, the board has been really clear about not typically wanting to have presentations. And if they are, make them very relevant and concise. So RENA has come up repeatedly over the last several years by this board. As a result, we have asked to have Maya Johnson from SCAG, who's the housing manager, provide a brief presentation. She's going to be available by Zoom here with comments and question and answer period from the board. The reason why this was agendized as an action item is that SCAG is currently soliciting feedback from stakeholders on RENA reform. We've talked about this in the last few meetings. SCAG is going to be working with the regional council to develop recommendations that will be submitted ultimately on SCAG on the whole region's behalf to HCD. But we wanted to have an opportunity for this COG to have some back and forth with SCAG. And if interested, create the opportunity if the board wanted to submit its own letter to SCAG or to HCD about RENA reform. So we know that Beverly Hills, City of Beverly Hills has been working on its own comment letter. So anyway, that's just gonna set the stage. And I think we'll start first with Mayan having her presentation, and then we can proceed with the discussion.
And I think just to set a framework to an expectation, considering again the time constraints, we should limit this to 25 minutes perhaps, and make sure we hear from everybody on this. If we need to do more subsequently, that's great, but we have several other items to follow. And this could easily fill the meeting. So just wanted to set some, we're going to watch the clock on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mayan.
Great. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mayan Johnson, Housing Program Manager at SCAG. Thank you for having me today. And I will make sure to keep this as brief as possible. And also, we want to focus on the discussion because that's the whole point of our outreach efforts for RENA reform right now. So just as a quick recap, RENA reform, why we're doing this is because during the 6th RENA cycle, which concluded last year, there are a number of issues raised by our jurisdictions and stakeholders regarding a variety of factors about the RENA process. So that's the determination, the appeals process, the methodology factors, a lot of issues were raised. And so we've committed to review these issues and facilitate conversations with HCD to reform the RENA process. Meanwhile, there's also state RENA reform. So AB 101, which is the same source of the Regional Early Action Planning Grant and also your local Early Action LEAP grants. And so that requires that HCD revamp RENA to develop a process and methodology change, including statewide stakeholder participation. And this will culminate in a report to the state legislature by December of next year. What I want to point out, though, is that this RENA reform per statute is limited to the RENA process. So it does not include zoning issues or housing element issues, site capacity. We acknowledge this is a large problem for a lot of our jurisdictions, but for RENA reform purposes, it's only limited to the RENA process. So just as a quick calendar of what we're doing for RENA reform, right now we're still doing outreach. And then we ask that comments be sent to housing@scag.ca.gov. We say tomorrow is the deadline, but we are now able to take our time since HCD has not published their schedule for their RENA reform efforts. So what we're doing now is just getting input on what we should be changing with RENA reform, what we should look at, what we should consider. And then staff will develop recommendations and have another outreach process on the recommendations themselves before we go to our CHD and regional council committees to take action on these recommendations. And staff will put that into a comment letter, an official comment letter, and submit that to HCD as part of their outreach process. And so because we don't have these dates or specifically what they're working on, that's why you see a lot of TBDs. So today we don't have to have the answers, but we do want ideas from you on what we should be looking at for RENA reform. So I will kind of fly through these slides just so we can focus on the discussion, but just a quick reminder, if you have already forgotten what RENA is all about, it is a determination of both existing and projected housing need. So HCD comes up with the regional determination, that's that 1.34 million number, that's how many units we'll need for this period. And they give it to each council of government. So for SCAG, we got that number, and then we adopted a methodology. And methodologies can change cycle to cycle. It doesn't have to be what we did for the 6th cycle, doesn't need to be what we do for the 7th cycle. And so the methodologies apply to the regional number, and then you get an individual draft RENA allocation. We then have an appeals process, and then there's the final RENA allocation adoption, and then housing elements have to be updated based on that final RENA number. So those are due in October last year. And so just as a quick PSA, October 2022, that's this coming October, is the deadline for jurisdictions that still want to have 3 years to do their rezoning. If you miss that deadline, then you cannot have your housing element found in compliance by HCD until you do all of your rezoning. So just as a quick aside, the deadline is coming up, so just make sure that those are adopted in compliance, but we do understand this is very challenging given how high the RENA cycle is and the extra constraints. But again, for RENA reform, it's everything up to the final RENA allocation. So anything about housing elements, we'll try to look at after this process at a later time. So as a quick look at the RENA determinations, you can see the 6th cycle was much higher than the prior cycle, which is about less than a third of the 6th cycle. The 4th cycle was about 700,000, but it is HCD that gives us this number. What I want to point out too in this slide is that not just what goes in the determination matters, but also the order, how they're applied. So as a quick example, you see the 5th and 6th cycles, they have both about the same existing and projected households. So 6.5 million versus 6.8, about the same, very close to each other. But then you look at something such as replacement need, which is about 0.5%. This is to replace units that are demolished due to fire, or they're demolished to make room for another house or a housing unit. So there is a replacement need. It's usually 0.5%. So it's the same for 5th and 6th cycles, 0.5%, but you can see for the 5th cycle, 0.5% was applied to projected households since occupied units were taken out. So it's about 2,400 units. For the fifth cycle, you see that it's 0.5% as well, but this is applied to both existing and projected households before the occupied units are taken out. So while it's still 0.5%, it's 34,000. So you can see this starts adding up with the different factors involved. The sixth cycle did require new factors such as overcrowding and cost-burdened households, but this starts adding up depending on how you apply these. So I just wanted to point out too, what we're looking for is not just maybe what goes in it, but how should it be applied? And should things like this be codified, the order of it, rather than left up to the discretion of HCD for each COGS determination? So the RENA methodology, once we get the final determination, then each COG develops its own methodology. The sixth cycle was based on these main factors: share of household growth, job access, so access to jobs within a 30-minute drive commute, transit access, so this is defined as connecting to our Connect SoCal plan, so populations within HQTAs, high quality transit areas, so areas with 15 or more minute headways during peak hours, so transit access. And then there's a social equity adjustment, not just looking at household income distribution, but also indicators of access to resources such as education and environment. So the combination of these are the primary determinants of your jurisdiction's RENA allocation. As a comparison for the fifth cycle, it was mostly just share of household growth. We didn't have other factors such as job access or transit access. So what we're looking at for RENA reform is, should there be other factors considered so that when we develop the seventh cycle, we'll have these recommendations ready for then the discussion. And so one thing to point out too, that if it's not codified and left up to the discretion of the COGs, what we recommend now for RENA reform for the COG, the decision-making body doesn't exist yet. So these would be advisory for SCAG for the seventh cycle. So just things to keep in mind, that while there's stakeholders who want to change a lot of things, they may not apply unless they're codified. But if they're codified, they will apply to other COGs in the state. So I'll go over now the RENA reform input that we've received so far during our outreach. And you may start noting that these don't come from the same stakeholder group or the same person. So one big thing that came out of a lot of input is that there should be a panel of experts to review the regional determination by HCD before it's finalized, because HCD is the final determinant. So it's up to them how they want to apply these figures. So a few stakeholders had noted maybe a panel of experts should be reviewing the determination. HCD did not reflect all required factors that are required. The regional determination should have been a range as in prior cycles. The sixth cycle determination, according to some stakeholders, was not sufficient. It was too low to meet SCAG's housing needs. Other comments included that there needs to be a definition in state law, that there's a consistency with the development pattern of the SCS that should be more clearly defined on the how and what should be considered. There should be more weight and emphasis on transit access and job access. Transit and job access factors should be based on the planning period. So whatever the 8-year planning period is, rather than a long-term look. So for the sixth cycle, the methodology used the Connect SoCal data for future HQTAs. So not just what's existing now, but HQTAs will have in 2045. So that did shift, that did have some emphasis on areas where there was a lot more HQTAs in the future. Other factors to include for the methodology, stakeholders noted there should be consideration of high wildfire risk areas, exceeding prior RENA needs. So if you've exceeded the fifth cycle RENA, you would have received a credit for the sixth cycle, for instance. Areas with high density should get some kind of adjustment. High median rents, vacant office space, and aging infrastructure. There wasn't a discussion on exactly how these should be applied, but at least that SCAG should be considering these things when distributing RENA units. Other comments also included more time should be provided for appealing jurisdictions on RENA. And then trade and transfer. So trade and transfer was an option for jurisdictions if they found another jurisdiction willing to take on more RENA units. they could transfer these units and have some kind of agreement. So that was taken out for the 6th cycle, and that used to be in state housing law. Although I can say in 16, 17 years at SCAG, no, I had not seen any agreement of a trade and transfer for RENA, but that was an option until this last cycle. So some indicated that should be brought back, maybe with parameters. And others argued that trade and transfer should not be allowed and that should remain outside of state housing law. And subregional delegation should not be made available. So that's another option where 2 or more jurisdictions that are geographically contiguous can receive a RENA allocation from SCAG. They come up with their own methodology, own appeals process, and we fold that back into our main allocation plan. And some argue that that should be taken out of state housing law as well. So this is just a highlight of some of the input received so far. So just a couple questions for discussion that we're seeking input on, but we are seeking input on anything related to RENA. But just to get your thoughts going, what are your thoughts on a panel of experts reviewing individual RENA determinations from HCD before they're finalized? So who should be on this panel, for instance? Should it be a census, another COG, some jurisdictions, a professor, academic? And what role could it have? Should it be just an advisory board, or should it actually make the final determination? What other factors should SCAG or other COGs include in the RENA methodology, such as I mentioned, high wildfire risk? Should they be codified statewide or be at the discretion of the COGs? And then what should be the basis here for factors? Should, if we consider transit access again, should that be only on current HQTAs in transit, or should it be longer term? Are there other factors that we should consider that connect us back to Connect SoCal? And then also, how can we continue furthering the state housing objective of affirmatively furthering fair housing? How do we increase access to fair housing for disadvantaged groups in distributing the RENA allocation? And how can appeals process be less cumbersome for jurisdictions and stakeholders? Since many of you who may have watched or participated may have felt that it was a little rushed. So how can we ensure that it's less cumbersome and that it's a fair and transparent process? So I'd be more than happy to take your input or answer questions, but this is generally what we're looking for RENA reform.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayan. That was complete and we appreciate it. I think we have 2 goals. The high level goal is to make a determination if in fact we want to collectively write a letter. If that's true, then we obviously have to figure out where the commonalities amongst each of our agencies is. There may or may not be a lot of commonality that would lend itself to writing a cogent letter. We in Beverly Hills already went through this exercise as council, and Cindy Owens, who's our in charge of our legislative efforts, actually crafted the letter, which, well, why don't you just, Cindy, why don't you just summarize the 4 or 5 major points that we put in the letter? And I think we've distributed it to everybody. You're welcome to copy it or trash it, depending on how you feel about it. But there are, we tried to, we're going to summarize it so as not to spend a lot of time, but perhaps as we go around after that to see if you're in agreement with some of those ideas or not, and whether or not you think we can come to some common view of this.
So the letter we did craft, it is quite long. It's 5 pages. That's why he's not having me read it. But one of the first points we make is that RENA should revert back to a planning tool. It currently isn't being used as a planning tool, which is what it was when it was originally conceptualized. So that was one of the things we're looking to ask for as far as RENA reform. When we look at what aspects should be considered for distribution of RENA to each city within the region, a lot of things we had talked about, stronger relationships between where job growth is occurring, rather than focusing on just locating new housing and new housing development, but you may not have the job growth to associate those people living in that area. And so as to make employment centers match where you're growing housing units. We also looked at the formulatic approach that RENA would be using, and we were wanting them to look at just how to improve the formula and look at how dense a current city is, what's their historical job growth and what their projected job growth is when determining how many units. Again, it's about having housing and jobs close together. We were also looking at is if there was interest in sub-regional delegation of RENA. So something like this COG would get a number from SCAG and then figure out how the cities within our COG would be distributed on those housing units. And we're looking for objective criteria that we can all agree on when we distribute that amongst ourselves, if we are going to do sub-regional cooperation. But what I think more importantly in all of this is kind of this trade and transfer of RENA. Part of what we want to do is build housing regionally, locate housing near jobs. But if one city has the money and one city has the job and another city has the land, why can't the three of us all band together to build it? And all three of us share in that credit. It wouldn't be the credit times 3. It would be, we built 1,000 units and each city would get a portion of that. And that's something we're strongly advocating for because we realize housing should be more of a regional issue than necessarily a local city issue. And I think that probably covers most of the major points of this. And I think SB 809 by Senator Allen is something you also wanted to address, Dr.
Right.
Gold?
So there was an attempt by Contract Cities who sponsored a bill through Senator Allen to really try and develop a collaborative wherein cities and or counties could opt into an arrangement, a JPA effectively, where we could do some of what Cindy was talking about in terms of finding land, money, and potentially jobs and putting them together in some way and distributing the RENA numbers. As a result of that, it died and never came out of appropriations, and so it's probably dead. They put it on as a 2-year bill, but I think it's dead. So it was an attempt by Contract Cities to at least jumpstart that conversation. So I'm going to go around and maybe Sharona, you have some thoughts you want to add to that, and then we'll go to kind of in order. Culver City, Santa Monica. Good. Great. Okay. So I should say that. Yeah. The letter was a collective from the council, so everybody's opinions are reflected there. So Alex, I guess you're next.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief, which none of us are, elected officials. My primary thing here that I think really is a regional, comment is that there are two choices that we have to deal with the collective action problem of local governments and housing growth, right? We all know at some level that when local government has a hard time saying yes to housing, and to solve that coordination problem across 522 municipalities and cities and counties that don't want to irritate certain people in their community, you can either have a zoning budget or you can have state mandates to deal with that coordination problem. And RENA is a zoning budget. It's an opportunity for us to come together, coordinate this work and say, we're all doing this together to our constituents, right? And we at least have some control over our part of the zoning budget. So any sort of RENA reform, I think we need to show the legislature that we're taking it seriously and that we're trying to be partners, that we really are taking our responsibility as stewards of the zoning budget and trying to say yes to the housing. Otherwise, we're going to see the state mandates. And I think that as a regional body, it is our opportunity to keep as much local control as possible and use it in a way that really does serve a statewide interest. And I think the objectives that are clearly coming from the state, and I think we can all agree on really, is that we need to use land use authority and our planning tools to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We know the numbers from the state. California Air Resources Board has been clear. It's probably one of the best regulators in the world, and I don't say that just because I represent them. We want rents to go down, because even if you're a landlord, you've got to look out in the streets and see that there's a problem. We want the housing to be near the jobs and the good school districts. And we need to desegregate affluent cities. That trend has been going in the wrong direction, unfortunately, ever since the Fair Housing Act. And that's the exact opposite of what the intention of that was. So that's sort of my thing is I think we need to step up, and we should not try to use a reform process to sort of as guerrilla warfare against this. We should use it to make it work for us. Thanks for the opportunity to say that.
So just so that I understand, you do believe that we ought to, if people sort of line up with some or all of what you said, we should send a letter. It should include some of the elements that you just outlined. Is that true?
That's a fair summary. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Sue? You're muted.
Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you. I always worry about talking about this because our housing element has not yet been approved. And every time I say anything, there's some news article about what I said that seems to imply that I and we don't support affordable housing, that we don't support the RHNA goals. I've made it very clear here what I say about this and what I believe Santa Monica generally feels about it. Santa Monica is more dense than every city except West Hollywood in this COG. We've built more affordable housing and we have rent control. So we have, we're dense. We have a lot of housing. We care about making our schools and our, the benefits of living in Santa Monica, all of our great services, et cetera, to people who are less fortunate. I mean, this is a big value for us. And anybody who knows me knows I'm an affordable housing advocate. My problem with the way that the RHNA numbers develop is that there's not a focus on what's really needed. Instead, I feel that it's a focus on a more gross measure of what you can force us to take. And then that's used as leverage to say that we need to do something more and different. And I want to point you again to the APA article that I think I've distributed to everybody that says that West Hollywood and we are model cities and should be allowed to have the freedom to develop innovative housing programs as we have in the past. And I think that the way that RHNA is treated right now does not allow jurisdictions who really do care about equity and justice to develop housing plans that promote that.
So I'll ask you, yeah, I'm sorry.
But let me say one more thing. The emphasis on jobs and job growth is, I'm just going to say, I think it's a red herring, really, the job growth thing. Any city can grow jobs as much or as little as it wants. And it shouldn't be an excuse for not building housing. In other words, to say we aren't going to have job growth, so we aren't building housing, I think it's a poor excuse. But I'm not sure that my views are aligned with everybody in this room, so I am going to stop now.
Okay, so again, the same questions to you. It doesn't sound like you think there's much of a letter we should write, or there's not going to be any alignment with what we said so far.
That's what I said. I think I'm stating what I think we look. I said before, and there was some discussion of whether we should sue HCD. I don't know whatever happened with that. It sort of fell off the map, and now I'm a little wrapped up in other things. But I really believe that the way HCD has implemented the requirements is arbitrary and capricious. And I've said that before.
Okay.
And I look forward to the article tomorrow about that.
Lauren?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll start with, I think we should, as a COG, send a letter. We just need to find those points that we can all agree on. And then if we need to send our own letters for our cities on the points that we may not agree on. One thing I would like to see changed in the whole way things are done with the RHNA numbers is the formulas. I don't think that it really takes into consideration underutilized lots versus a lack of underutilized lots. So you can give all the numbers you want, but if there's no land to build on, it doesn't make any sense. I think that it also needs to consider not only what units are lost, but also displacement. Because what we've seen in our city is that, when a building gets purchased and then it's demolished, those tenants are gone. Because by the time that new housing is built, they've already left the city because they can't find anything affordable within the city. I think that we need to have better definitions of a dwelling unit and of permanent housing. That's one discussion we've had, was talking about permanent housing. What is and what isn't permanent housing? And if you look at HCD, if you look at other agencies, there is no definition, and that doesn't make any sense. So, for example, HCD says that SROs can count towards individual units, and yet a co-living project, those individual bedrooms, which is basically the same as an SRO, don't count. It's the whole unit, not just the bedroom. So I think that they need to look at counting those bedrooms when they are different households that are renting those bedrooms. I think that I agree with Sue in that we really need to have a better focus on the types of units needed. For example, in the city of West Hollywood, we don't necessarily need more luxury units, but we are always open to more affordable units and mostly moderate units. That's where we're missing out, is the missing middle. So to give numbers and say, you need to build 4,000 units and 38% of them have to be market rate doesn't make sense for our city. In addition, the more it seems like it's not the supply and demand, the economics of that don't seem to be working in our city. It seems like every time we build expensive units, then units that are already existing, their prices go up because they can do it. If it was $1,500 for a one-bedroom unit, now it's $2,000 for a one-bedroom unit because the new building is $3,000. So I think they really have to look at the economics as well. And they also need to look at how short-term rentals have affected available units, and maybe short-term, if a city allows short-term rentals and our city allows it, but only as hosted units and not in apartments. If they are allowed in apartments and they don't have to be hosted, that's a problem because that's basically allowing a commercial use in a residential project. And so those units, if that's allowed in the city, they should not count towards their units of housing because it's not housing. So I would like them to look at that. And then in terms of jobs and housing, I think that one of the things that SCAG has not done very well is really focused on economic development in areas where there could be economic development and then housing, because the people who are in those areas have to travel downtown or wherever to get work, when we should be also thinking about bringing jobs to people, not only people to jobs. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you. We're about 20. All right, we have two more speakers, I think, on this. Paul, you're next, but if we can be brief, I'd appreciate it.
I'll have an opportunity to be brief because I think the previous speaker said about 90% of what I wanted to say. That was great. In general, I think the whole problem with this process is it's trickle-down economics and it doesn't work. And if we build hundreds of thousands of new luxury units in Los Angeles, it doesn't mean that people on the low end would be able to find housing. If anything, as was noted, it creates displacement and it creates the older homes winding up having higher rents when they're vacated. The next rent is much more comparable to the new ones. It's absurd that they have an overcrowding number, because if they built 6.7% or whatever the number was for overcrowding, that doesn't mean anybody in an overcrowded unit is going to be able to buy a luxury unit. It's overcrowded because people don't have the income. So you build a $3,000 one bedroom, you're not going to be getting anyone out of overcrowded conditions. So it's just an excuse to add more and more numbers. Also, any relation to building luxury housing near transit to get to jobs is also kind of a red herring, because we've certainly found, and we've looked at this in Los Angeles, the people that take transit are the ones that can't afford to have a car by and large. So the people that live in those homes now, live in those low cost apartments, they get displaced and they're replaced by people that are paying $3,000 or $4,000 a month for luxury rentals. And the people that take that housing, by and large, won't take transit. So in general, I think this whole approach is off the mark. We will wind up building hundreds of thousands of luxury units, and we'll miss the real goal, which is to build affordable and middle income units.
Thank you, Paul. I will note we're having a little technical thing up here. Is this, I don't know if this is our Zoom or somebody else's Zoom, but if in fact you get bumped off, just dial back in. We'll start the meeting again, but hopefully that won't happen. Fernando, did you have some comments? Also brief, please.
Yes, I mean, I think, the county's housing element was adopted by the board on May 17th. And I know that, Supervisor Kuhl's deputies have also been having conversations in terms of legislation that's been going on and conversations that happened here. I just want to make sure that I think the way it seems like the way that it is leaning is to kind of further refine what would like to be shared by the board. And I'd need to check back with Supervisor Kuhl, I guess, after those discussions and make sure that staff is part of that conversation, but no major comments. And I know we want to keep it brief. So that's all.
And I appreciate that. And after you do confer, it would be important, I think, for you to come back to us and tell us what the outcome of that looks like. So looking to move this along but recognizing the importance of it, I think two things. I think that Ian heard your comments. We're going to catalog those. And if it's okay with everybody, we will distribute our letter, but we'll also distribute the bullet points of what was said. And perhaps we can, in some sort of weighted way, vote, yes, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, and collectively then see where we align. We understand where people's thinking is. It's hard from the dais here to say, well, yes, this, and we don't have that kind of time. So if everybody's okay with that kind of process, to circulate the thoughts and you can agree with or disagree with whichever, we will do that. We'll move this forward and we'll bring it back at another meeting. Anybody have a problem with that? Everybody okay with that? No? Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to our next. Are you okay with that, Cecilia?
Yeah, that's great. And we'll do our best to summarize. And if we can do this quickly, maybe we can add it to our special meeting as an item to discuss, since we'll all be back together in September.
Okay, great. By the way, Cecilia, this is my first rodeo, so if I'm doing something wrong, kick me. All right. All right. That said, let's move on to our next agenda item, the Metro Crenshaw Northern Extension.
And I'll go ahead and just introduce this by noting that, as you know, we've been talking about the Crenshaw Northern Extension for quite some time. It's been one of the highest priority projects for the COG as a subregion. We received a request from City Council member Paul Koretz to agendize this item to put the COG on record with Metro about a specific alignment for the Northern Extension. So I'd rather just go ahead, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, to turn it over to Board Member Koretz. Yes, he's still on. To maybe introduce the item. And then as I understand it, Metro will do a very brief, maybe 5-minute recap of alignment so everybody has the context. And then we will have a discussion and see if the board wants to take action.
No more than 3 PowerPoint slides.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I wanted to take this Probably my final opportunity before leaving the council to talk with you about the Metro Crenshaw Northern Extension project. When it's finally completed, this project will be crucial to the transit connectivity on the west side, and it should continue to be a priority of the COG. It's true at this point that all LA City departments have offered input on the 3 remaining alternative route options and have not yet made a recommendation. However, as the process of environmental study moves forward, I remain confident that the key data will indicate that the Beverly Fairfax San Vicente hybrid option will make the most sense. The greatest challenge will be the added cost for this longer route, but in terms of connections to key destinations, the conclusion will be obvious. My colleagues from my former hometown of West Hollywood can make their own strong case for this hybrid option, but we with the city of LA also have what I believe are convincing arguments. Much of the territory for all 3 options are in my district, and I know the corridors well. The La Brea route could bring economic revitalization to parts of the corridor, but they don't come with as many pre-existing economic advantages. The northern portions of the Fairfax route also have the same characteristics. The hybrid option makes the connection with the Purple Line on Fairfax on Museum Row, and then connects with a stop adjacent to the farmers market, a short distance from the Grove, and also an immediate proximity to the future development at the old CBS Studios site. The hybrid option would then swing back to the west and will bring in line to Cedars-Sinai, which continues to make a long-term investment in and around their campus. And there's also key employment centers in proximity, such as the Beverly Center and the Beverly Connection. We need to look at Metro's own data, which indicates that the hybrid route would connect with 3 times the number of jobs and 6 times the number of population compared to the La Brea route. And I see a vote today in support of this option as the beginning of a coalescing of elected officials, community and business leaders in support of what would immediately become one of the busiest routes in the system. We all want this to be a major transit line that makes a meaningful and impactful connection to the west side. And I'd be grateful for your support today.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you for your many years of service. We'll miss you in this role. So we look forward to you in other roles in the future. Let's hear the Metro presentation, please.
Hey, good afternoon, members of the board. Councilmember Koretz. Let me share my screen with you real quick, and I'll keep this to 2 slides, understanding the constraints on time here.
Extra credit.
Perfect. Okay, hopefully you'll see my slide up there. Let me see slide 2 from beginning. Can everyone see the slides up here?
I can't.
You can or cannot? I'm sorry.
I cannot see it either.
That's it.
Okay, stand by here. Let me see. Here we go.
I can see it now.
Yep.
How about that?
Yes.
Hey, very good. Then let me just dig right into it. So the Crenshaw Northern Extension project will extend the soon-to-be Crenshaw LAX line from the northern terminus at Crenshaw Boulevard and Expo, north through West Adams, Mid-City, Central LA, West Hollywood to Hollywood, and potentially the Hollywood Bowl, connecting to both the D line on Wilshire and the B line in Hollywood at the Hollywood Highland Station. This project optimizes previous rail investment studies linking 4 of Metro's rail lines and 5 of the heaviest bus lines in the entire county, allowing for a seamless 1-seat train ride from South Bay all the way up to Hollywood, West Hollywood, and further into the San Fernando Valley. This project has the potential of serving, as Councilmember Koretz correctly noted, serving some of the busiest destinations, activity centers, employment centers in Southern California. Previous estimates projected this ridership to be about 90,000 boardings per day, nothing to sneeze at. Of course, this year we'll be updating the ridership and preparing cost estimates for each of the alternatives, which will be available when we release the draft EIR in the fall of 2023. Of course, as noted on this slide over here, Measure M expenditure plan allocates $2.24 billion for construction of the project in the 2040s. However, efforts are underway to identify potential funding that could help build the project sooner under Metro's board-approved early project delivery strategy. So here are the three alternatives that we're looking at under the EIR. All connect to the Crenshaw LAX line, of course, in the south side over here. The primary difference between the three alternatives is between Wilshire Boulevard on the south and Santa Monica Boulevard to the north. The La Brea alternative shown there on the right, or in the blue, uses La Brea to connect north up there. And then with regards to the middle line, shown the orange line, is the Fairfax alignment. Of course, you'll see that coming up right through the middle over there. Of course, the green line with the San Vicente Fairfax alignment further west, again, picking up the information that Mr. Koretz correctly identified as more jobs, more destinations along the way there. The lengths that you'll see there, of course, are 6, 8, and 10 miles respectively, depending on the length of the project. The minutes of the project, again, 13 for travel time, that's from almost end to end, 16 and 20 respectively. For the longer times, you'll see on the for the west side, 7 minutes longer than the La Brea alignment. But I think that's about the same time you'd go through an In-N-Out burger line and then you're in your drive-through. So I think it's not too bad. But with that, I think I'll stop at this point in consideration of time, and I'll unshare my screen.
Well, thank you for that. I didn't know that the subways went through In-N-Out. That would be a great innovation. Great idea. Okay, thank you for that. So our goal today, I think, what's being asked of us is if we could collectively support the extension this way. Before we start here, I understand that Councilmember Horvath. Not true? Not true. Okay, untrue. Okay, fine. I was misinformed. Why don't we start with Mayor Meister? Obviously, West Hollywood has been advocating for this for quite some time. So why don't you know? Absolutely.
Well, Councilman Koretz pretty much said it all. You can tell his West Hollywood roots. We want the line to cover, our city, and to be able to be the most effective for us. That would be the hybrid version of the line. We have Cedars-Sinai, we have, Santa Monica Boulevard. We have all of these very vibrant job centers around our city, and we have no freeways next to our city. So we need a route that's gonna service really our entire city, and that's obviously the hybrid. So as you know, we feel that as long as any environmental impacts can be mitigated, that that the more area that it covers, the better for our city.
Great, thank you. Start with Culver City next.
Thank you. Obviously this alignment is hugely important to all of the west side, and certainly impacts Culver City, which has rail service, and it's great. And the hybrid alignment has a really great thing going for it, in that the public likes it, which is important. It also hits a lot of destinations, and the countervailing additional travel time, which does impact Culver City residents, is, I think, is worth it for all those jobs and destinations and all the service that West Hollywood residents will receive. It's, other alignments have less public support, and that's significant. And West Hollywood and Los Angeles have been great partners to Culver City, and I think everybody on this. So I'm excited to express Culver City's support for the hybrid alignment.
Great, thank you. Mayor Highmore.
I assume you were talking to me. I pronounce my name Himmelrich, but you can call me Sue.
Okay, Sue, thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, no, not a big deal. So we've discussed this before. I think it's important for all of us to support each other in the areas in which we have needs and gaps. And I do. So this does not obviously directly affect Santa Monica. We have the train, we have the buses, we have the freeway. But I do believe that West Hollywood needs more public transportation. And so I believe that Santa Monica would fully support this.
Thank you. And I would say ditto to all of the above. Cedars-Sinai, I think, is the sixth largest employer in the county. They probably have 14,000 employees there every day. This would be a huge benefit to them, certainly for their employees, maybe even to some of their patients. I think that this does make the most sense, and I certainly would be supportive of this also. We've heard from Paul. Fernando, do you want to make any comments on this?
Yeah, again, as it was mentioned before, I think Councilmember Koretz and everybody that has chimed in has really covered the vast majority of the many important points. But I did want to, as well, on behalf of the supervisor, just thank Metro staff and everybody that participated in getting comments up to this point, because this is an excellent hybrid, option to be able to serve as many people as possible. And we know how important north-south connections within the transit system are, given a lot of historic divides and barriers to mobility for many county residents. So I'm very eager to, on behalf of the supervisor, voice full support for this. And thank you, Councilmember Koretz, for taking the leadership to bring this up to the board. So happy to support on behalf of the supervisor.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of written comments, but before we do, is there anybody else here who would like to speak to this? Anybody? No? Okay. Okay, so with that, let's move to the written comment, please.
Yes, and this is Riley with West Side City's COG staff. We did receive 2 public comments over email, one from Noe Mendoza and another from Michael Angarola. I apologize if I mispronounced the names, but they both emailed me very straightforward comments saying they support the West Side City's COG endorsing the hybrid alignment.
Great, thank you. And there's no other public comment on this?
That is correct.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to support the recommendation of the Metro Crenshaw Northern, the hybrid extension as proposed.
I'd like to move that.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second West Hollywood.
Fantastic. Roll call, please.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes. Whoa, sorry. Yes.
City of West Hollywood,
Yes.
City of Los Angeles,
Yes.
and County of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Great. It's unanimous. The motion passes.
And thank you,
Fantastic.
everyone.
And we will draft a letter expressing the COG support, which we will circulate. Okay. Last voting item is I think it's a voting item. Lauren, is the vote, the conflict of interest.
Okay, so there is a regular update to the West Side City's COG Conflict of Interest Code that is required. The Conflict of Interest Code, all of your cities probably do it as well. It designates which officials have to file their Form 700s, which you're all familiar with. And because there have been no changes to the organization and the bylaws and the JPA have stayed the same, I believe that there are no updates needed to the COG's Conflict of Interest Code required this year. And so there's a form that the COG has to fill out and it requires board approval, and that is in your packet.
Fantastic.
So unless there's any questions, we can entertain a motion to
Thank you.
to certify that.
Any
Yeah, this
questions?
is a requirement of the county to periodically take a look at your code. We just did our recommendation.
Move to certify.
Your second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
City of West Hollywood,
Yes.
City of Los Angeles,
Yes.
and then County of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Great, unanimous, and it passes. Okay, Cecilia, it's time for you to give us a report.
Great. I will go very quickly. You've seen the written materials. I'm not going to reiterate very much of this. Just a couple things to underline. One is we are working on a seamless transition from our treasurer from the City of Beverly Hills to the City of Culver City. One hiccup we're having is around the cost of our annual audit. We're trying to work through and find other options. So we have deferred this item. It'll come back to you in a couple of months. But we're trying to find a more reasonable cost because it will have major budget implications for us. I want to turn it over to Riley really fast on transportation, and then Winnie's going to take housing and homelessness.
Yes, thank you. I would like to just provide a quick update on the work that we've done alongside the Westside COG Transportation Working Group. So some of our recent focus areas, we've continued our focus on the large metro Measure M projects, including the Crenshaw Northern Extension, the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, and the Purple Line Extension. We received an update from Metro on the Sepulveda Transit Corridor during our June working group meeting. We have also focused on federal infrastructure funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework and other sources. This includes the Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant. Caltrans has offered to support our subregion and our member jurisdictions in applying for federal funding. And we will also receive a presentation later this month during our next working group meeting on the County of Los Angeles Infrastructure LA initiative to unlock more of that federal funding. Some of our other next steps include an industry forum on Metro Bike Share that I will be attending along with other transportation working group members. We will be continuing our discussion of the large metro projects, and we will also continue our discussion on prioritizing the remaining 75% of the subregional equity program funds for Metro, as we have already devoted 25% to the Crenshaw Northern Extension. And that is all.
Thank you.
Really briefly on both the housing and homelessness. First up on the homelessness, you can see on the agenda, we've met in June with the homelessness working group. We have rescheduled our presentation and special meeting with Be Well OC, which was originally on June 25th. As of yesterday, we finalized that date. The new date for that virtual meeting with Be Well OC is on Wednesday, September 28th at 1 p.m. And then we're also meeting this month with the working group, and hopefully we'll get in touch with the Department of Mental Health to talk about a regional approach to the 988 rollout hotline related to behavioral health and mental health crisis. On housing, we wrapped up our project deliverable from the presentation from Arab on the development and land constraint analysis. Hopefully your cities can use that as part of your housing elements. We are also working with consultant Echo Northwest on a regional affordable housing funding program. We just wrapped up the interviews with all of your cities, so thank you to our staff, to your staff on that. Our staff is also undergoing the research for a regional fair housing study to incorporate as part of the implementation of your housing elements. So we hope to do a presentation with you all by the end of this year. And we've also connected with your cities to talk about REAP 2.0, which is another round of funding. Our COG is receiving about $340,000 to do regional planning and activities. So we're working with SCAG on that, and the application was to apply for that funding was originally set for this fall, but they pushed it back to early of next year. So we have a little bit of time to coordinate with your cities on what to do with that funding. So, and that is our wrap up.
Say one more thing on the REAP 2.0. There is a substantial amount of funding available for all of our cities. And it's just a matter of getting a handle on what that might be the best project for you. So we encourage you strongly we're happy to help you access that funding, but we know SCAG is under quite a bit of pressure to get the money out the door. So we encourage your cities to apply. Great.
Any questions for that, on any of that?
I do have a question. So the funding, is it dependent on having a compliant housing element?
I believe it is, but I'm not entirely sure. Sue or Mayor Himmelrich. We'll
Call me Sue, it's fine. I don't mind. Very soon everybody will be calling me Sue all the time. No, but I think that's important. 2 here has been approved. Has West Hollywood been approved?
No, nobody. The county.
Right, well, on our cog,
And
right?
city. Yeah,
In our cog, there,
I think LA City it was.
Yeah, City of Los Angeles, I think it's been approved.
right, City of LA has been approved.
Yeah.
Now that
Okay.
they planned for their 250,000 units, right?
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, 21 jurisdictions, just to wrap up that conversation, in the SCAG region have received an approved housing element, but nobody in this COG other than the city and the county of Los Angeles. Obviously, my report is in the packet. It's made mostly out of date already because both of the appropriations committees in the Senate and the Assembly are meeting today, clearing out all of those fiscal bills in advance of the deadline tomorrow. I don't expect for them to meet tomorrow. So, you know, we're really down to the last 2 weeks or so of the legislative session. So I would encourage everyone, if you have bills that are still active that your city or you are interested in, the best way to really interact with your legislators right now is to pick up the phone and call them, text them, reach out to their offices if you don't have their direct numbers. But it is important. We're really in the crunch time right now. Other than that, I would just mention that we did have our installation of our officers last week. Andrew Chow of the city of Diamond Bar is now the president. And we do have a great year ahead of us. And of course, the annual conference down in Long Beach is less than a month away. I would note for everyone that there are no resolutions that were brought to us for the General Assembly on the Friday of the annual conference. However, the board has placed on the agenda for that some bylaw amendments. That packet of information did go out in the newsletter, which hopefully most people in here are receiving direct to their emails that went out about 9:20 a.m. this morning from my email, but as labeled the LA County Division. If you aren't in receipt of that, you can find it also on Facebook or Instagram at Los Angeles Cities. I think that's all I have. I'll give back my time.
Thank you, sir. Are there any board members who have comments that they'd like to make? Go ahead.
Just really quickly, this Saturday, our new recreation center is opening. We have our grand opening at 10 a.m. And then on the 21st of August, we have Ciclavia happening in West Hollywood and parts of LA. So we look forward to seeing you there with your bicycle.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We have in Culver City, the Fiesta La Bayona, the weekend of the 26th to the 28th. It's our big party in the park. They missed out on a giant revenue activity of putting me in a dunk tank. So that's not on offer, but come by and check out our community.
You intentionally didn't tell us that in advance. Okay, anybody else? All good. You saw the future meetings are on the agenda when he highlighted the behavioral crisis meeting. Are there any members of the public who would like to address us at this time? Anybody in the chamber? Do we have anybody who's written to us? No? Okay, so it appears there's no public comment. We'll close the public comment session. And with that, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your thoughts, your attendance.
Thank you, everybody.